The debate stage is set. The first meeting between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump in an unprecedented election cycle. And a lot has happened. This debate could mark a turning point in the race.
Anything could tip it in one way or the other.
He needs to show that he's got the fire in him to go another 4 years.
What I've been able to do with the COVID,
And if he was supposed to comfort people who were concerned about his age and his ability, that did not happen tonight.
There are at least some House Democrats talking to the White House about having him step down.
You want to really see something that's said, take a look at what happened.
We are coming on the air. Shots have rung out at a rally where President Trump was addressing the crowd.
People just hit the ground. We jumped beneath our elevated stage. It was a chaotic moment.
Remarkable to see the 45th President of the United States walking on the floor of the convention after being grazed by a bullet.
There was its running mate, J.D. Vance.
President Trump represents America's last best hope.
We will press forward, and together we will win, win, win.
While this convention is unified, the Democratic Party is divided.
The president is under pressure to drop out of the 2024 race.
Another twist in what has already been a historic election cycle. President Biden says he will end his re-election bid.
I decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation.
I accept your nomination to be President of the United States of America. America, hope is making a comeback.
A hell of a lot can change in 4 weeks.
Our campaign, this campaign, is a fight for the future.
And we will make America great again.
This is a CBS News special, America Decides, the presidential debate. Now reporting, Norah O'Donnell.
Good evening, and we are just an hour away from what could be the only debate between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump. And what makes this night even more historic is that this will be the first time these two presidential candidates have ever met. That's right. Tonight will be Trump's 7th general election presidential debate, the most of any candidate in the modern era. For Vice President Harris, it will be her first and by far longest unscripted setting during her campaign. If anyone had any doubt about the importance of these debates, that was answered following June's face-off between Trump and Biden. It was considered such a disaster for President Biden that he dropped out of the race less than a month later. So fast forward to tonight. The stakes are high for both candidates with just 56 days until Election Day. We've got an amazing political team here in the studio to discuss what's ahead. But first, let's go right to the debate site in Philadelphia. Senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang covers the Harris campaign. And Weijia, what have you learned about how the vice president is preparing for tonight?
Nora, it is great to be with all of you, and we know that the vice president has really approached this as a diligent student. She has been poring over materials with close aides. That includes studying the previous 6 presidential debates of former President Trump's and consulting with Hillary Clinton, who, of course, was on the other end of 3 of those debates. And she's been practicing with a stand-in for Trump, who was a Clinton aide who was even dressing the part. And before she arrived here in Philadelphia last night, she was holed up in a Pittsburgh hotel doing these extended mock debate sessions, and her team even built a stage with bright lights to replicate the environment that she would face tonight. And she wants to focus on policy over personality, and we know that she has had a lot of policy meetings so that she can condense her answers into swift 2-minute messages, since that will be her time limit. And we know that part of the strategy, Nora, is that she really wants to needle Trump. She wants to try to rattle him and get under his skin. And on the flip side of that, she's been practicing dealing with potential personal attacks. And aides tell me it's really important to Harris to try to remain unbothered and calm. But she has another challenge tonight, too, because more than a third of voters in key battleground states, according to CBS News polling, say they still don't know what she stands for. So she'll be focused on that as well. And her team says, this is not about fact-checking Trump, but she will be prepared, Nora, tonight to call out any lies from him.
Weijia Jiang in Philadelphia tonight. Weijia, thank you. CBS News Chief Election and Campaign Correspondent Robert Costa is also at the debate site. And Robert, I know you have been in touch with the Trump campaign. And so how has the former president said he prepared for tonight?
Great to be with you. There haven't been these kind of prep sessions that's happening over on the Harris campaign side. Sources close to former President Trump tell me he's been playing some golf. He's been staying loose. He's been having casual discussions with his aides. And when they say to former President Trump, she's going to try to prosecute you on stage tonight, he has dismissed it. He's laughed it off. He believes he can make her own her policies and President Biden's policies tonight. And that regardless of her strategy, regardless of her prep, he's going to have a reactive approach tonight, watching to see her method, trying to interpret what she's trying to accomplish, and counter it as someone who has been in the public eye for a half century, as a celebrity, a real estate developer, ultimately as president, and now again as candidate. This is a real test, though, for former President Trump. Yes, he's been on this kind of stage before, but can he expand his coalition tonight? Can he reassure some of those traditional Republicans? Think about former Congresswoman Liz Cheney saying she's endorsing Vice President Harris. Can he make an overture not only to independents and centrists, but to Republicans as well? I'm told he's going to focus especially on the border, talk about crime, talk about border security, and talk about the economy. Those issues the Trump campaign believes ultimately will decide this election.
Robert Costa, also in Philadelphia for us tonight. Robert, thank you very much. And tonight will no doubt be the biggest audience of this election cycle. Let's bring in our chief political analyst, John Dickerson. John, how do you think what happens tonight could change the dynamics of this race?
Well, campaigns can be kind of silly, but debates are an escape from that if the voters choose to look at them that way. I mean, they are the most formal moment for voters to look at these two people and say, can they handle this job? And we have the sad anniversary tomorrow of the attacks of 9/11, which remind us how seriously the presidency can get very quickly. And you think about, there have been terrorist attacks, pandemics. There have been 2 financial shocks in the last two out of the last 3 presidencies. It is a job of high stakes challenges. And that's what voters can do when they look at the candidates. In addition to the ongoing challenges in America, the road to opportunity isn't what it once was. Climate change, the budget deficit is getting larger. So which of these 2 candidates has the judgment, the temperament, the character? It's a chance for voters to actually take the measure and say, can they do this very difficult, very serious job?
Not only do the hardest job in the world, but be commander-in-chief.
All those nuclear weapons, troops in more than 150 countries. Yes, exactly. The minute they lower that hand after they take the oath of office, they have the most power at their disposal, and it's all on their shoulders.
Want to bring in our Face the Nation moderator, Margaret Brennan. And Margaret, the other thing about tonight, too, though, is voters want the candidate of change. We've got a former president. We've got someone who's been vice president. How do they each position themselves to voters who say, I want something different?
Well, that's the challenge here, because former President Trump has been campaigning on this idea that the vice president would simply be a continuation of Joe Biden's first term. And when we look at our CBS polling of key battleground states like Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, you can see in that data that Trump is winning the argument when it comes to the candidate who is perceived to bring change to the country. You can see those numbers right there on your screen. And Vice President Harris is a sharp contrast to the 78-year-old challenger in style and in substance. But this is an abbreviated campaign. She is in many ways just defining her platform issues to the public. And so within that, how do you decide to describe yourself as a change candidate when you're the incumbent defending the policies of the administration you're still serving under? That is the challenge. Certainly, we have seen she's more comfortable talking about things like reproductive health care, far more so than Joe Biden ever was. But she's really carved out the smallest of policy differences with him so far, even on those key issues like the economy, which we see in our polling is the defining issue here. So how do both of these known entities reintroduce themselves in a way that excites people about this campaign?
That's why it's so exciting to watch what is ahead. Certainly tonight. Nancy Cordes, you are our chief White House correspondent. And as we've been talking about, this recent CBS News poll shows that more than a third of voters in battleground states say they don't know what Kamala Harris stands for. In Pennsylvania, it's 40%. How does that affect tonight?
Right. And a lot of those voters who say they don't know much about her are Republicans, but there are independents there, too, and she needs to win those independents over. And that's why campaign officials tell me that she's not going to spend the night getting into tiffs with Donald Trump. She's not going to take the bait every time because she needs to spend time talking about herself, talking about her policies, talking about her vision for the country. And frankly, she doesn't need to spend time defining him and calling him out every time. He's been in 17 debates over the last 3 presidential election cycles when you count primary debates as well. The electorate knows him. And so that doesn't mean that she's going to ignore him. It just means she's going to pick her battles tonight. And I had one aide tell me something interesting today, Nora. She said that part of proving to voters that they should trust her to take on world leaders is proving that she can take on Donald Trump first. And so that is a hurdle she needs to get over tonight.
Nancy Cordes, thank you. I want to bring in our senior White House and political correspondent, Ed O'Keefe. The other dynamic tonight is this is happening in Pennsylvania, one of these 7 crucial battleground states.
The biggest one of them all, 19 electoral votes up for grabs. And you've seen both candidates spend more time in Pennsylvania as candidates than any other because they understand to win Pennsylvania makes it much easier for either of them to win. That's why, for example, one of the first things the Harris team signaled when she became the presumed nominee was that, oh, that position I took on fracking back in the day where I was opposed to it, that's no longer the case. Turns out I've learned as vice president that, in fact, you can frack and still address climate change in other ways. It's why you're seeing members of the Democratic and Republican Party saying both of these candidates tonight need to focus on bread and butter issues like the economy, how to deal with inflation, yes, to some extent, how to deal with reproductive rights. Because who do you win Pennsylvania with? You win it with women in the suburbs. You win it with those independent voters across the state who are eager to hear from both of them on the issues, not these personality clashes and attacks that could come. Republicans I've spoken to today very nervous that if he gets himself into another slugfest with his opponent, it could set lasting impressions with about 56 days to go with that handful of voters who might have been inclined to support him if he could only focus on issues instead of personality.
And when you say slugfest, do you mean a slugfest with gendered terms like he has done in the past by calling Hillary Clinton a nasty woman? He has called Kamala Harris dumb. He's leveled a bunch of other insults at her.
Any and all of that would be seen as a non-starter for that handful, that small handful of potential swing voters in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Georgia, everywhere else, but especially Pennsylvania tonight.
I want to bring in our chief Washington correspondent, Major Garrett. And Major, we've covered a number of these debates together, and you hear allies close to Trump saying, focus on the policy, not the personal stuff that Ed was just talking about. But in many cases, Donald Trump can't help himself.
Often he can't. But the emphasis in the pre-debate preparation for the president to focus on the issues, stay there. That is your safest, most resilient lane. But there's something worth observing about this debate. There are 3 candidates on stage: Harris, Trump, and expectations. The expectations are pretty well baked in for former President Trump. People know what to expect. They're looking in to find out what exactly Kamala Harris will say and do. What will her mannerisms be toward former President Trump? Can she stand up to him? Will there be these gendered, subtextual jibes? This isn't 2016. The nation is in a different place. It processes gendered slights differently than it did in 2016. The Trump campaign knows that. They've counseled the former president on that. They're urging him to avoid that because they can see it as a huge trap. One other thing. As for the former president, they had a session on Sunday, described to me not as a debate prep, but a bull session. They were lobbing all the hardest questions and jibes they could think from Kamala Harris at former President Trump. He batted them casually away. They felt very good after that. They took the entire Monday off. we'll see if that was a good idea.
All right, that's interesting, Major Garrett. Thank you. Let's bring in CBS News contributor Ed Gordon. Ed, you had one of those last interviews with President Biden before he dropped out of the race. What are you looking for tonight?
Well, that's the interesting thing. She's got to figure out how to stay true to Joe Biden, keep her part of the administration with the idea of charting her own course now. That's going to be difficult in some areas, i.e. the economy, let's suggest. She also has to understand that she's only playing to a very small sliver of voters tonight. Most people have decided she is not looking for someone who is going to either vote for her or Donald Trump. She's trying to move people who have suggested, give me a reason to vote for you. And that's really what it's about today for her.
And what about her background and her experience? A lot of people have talked about this is the prosecutor versus the convicted felon. She was, of course, in the debate club at Howard University. What about her background?
Again, a fine line she's got to walk. A lot of people have suggested because Trump's been on this particular stage 7 times, they're acting as if she is a true novice. I think we saw what she can do and handle during the DNC. There are a number of people. I was with some large fundraisers over the weekend, and their suggestion is if she comes close to the performance she had at the DNC, they'll be very pleased with what they'll be able to bring in and garner after tonight.
She has already outraised Donald Trump 3-1 in this last cycle. Ed Gordon, thank you so much. We also want to talk about the rules tonight, because that is part of the dynamic. The presidential debate is hosted by ABC and the network, and both of the candidates agreed to these following rules. The debate will run 90 minutes with 2 breaks. There will be no opening statements. Each candidate's mic will be muted when it's not their turn to speak. Closing statements are 2 minutes, and once again, there's no audience. Now, there was a virtual coin flip that took place earlier this month. Trump's campaign won, and the toss there, since he won, well, he chose to have the final closing statement. The Harris campaign chose to stand the vice president at the right lectern. The other interesting thing that was talked about, you may have heard, was this controversy over the microphones. Nancy Cordes, explain what was that about? Why was this such a big deal?
Right. It seems like such a trivial element, right? The problem for Kamala Harris is that back when this was the Biden campaign, Biden's aides chose to strike a deal with the Trump campaign that whoever was not speaking in the debates would have their microphone turned off.
And that's because in 2020 it got out of control.
It was a slugfest.
Yeah.
They were talking over each other. Joe Biden, a little bit hard of hearing, so if he's being talked over, he's not necessarily going to hear what Trump is saying or what the moderators are saying. And so that was the agreement. Now Harris is the nominee, and she'd love to have the mic up the whole time. First of all, because the campaign thinks that one of her strongest moments in her vice presidential debate in 2020 was when she was there with Mike Pence, and he was talking over her, and she said, "Excuse me, I'm speaking." And it's a quick way to show dominance. But if you can't hear him because he's speaking out of turn, then what's the point? And so Trump said he was for it. Harris said she was for having the mics turned up. But Trump campaign officials were not for it. They knew exactly the trap that they were walking into, so they wouldn't budge. And so the rules have not changed. The microphones will be down for whoever is not speaking.
I mean, how do you think it changes things? Because we are in a period now, John, where, and CBS has an upcoming debate, the vice presidential debate. The moderators are there to moderate the conversation, not to fact check the candidates. It's the onus of each of the candidates to fact check one another. When the mics are dead, how do you quickly fact check someone?
Well, can I just answer another question first, Nora, which is
no.
I will sit here mute. No, we're talking about, and this also Major touched on this, the things that Donald Trump's campaign is having to get him to do to restrain himself for a brief 90-minute period of time so that he can behave like an adult. That's extraordinary. We will see evidence of temperament in the 90 minutes, but that is an evidence of temperament as well, which is that he is the kind of person that requires mics to be cut off, thoroughgoing instructions not to stray down multiple garden paths. That tells us something about the presidency. You need a calm temperament for that job. So we've learned something before the debate has even taken place. But back to your point, and it's a very important one, Nora, in the age of multiple falsehoods and misinformation, it is the candidate's job to fact check, but it's also our job when we're not moderating. You will be, so you won't for the vice presidential, but it's all of our jobs to fact check. And it's the American people's job to say, wait a minute, I'm going to decide that a person who tells too many lies is not fit for a job where honesty is crucial, because you might have a pandemic. And when the pandemic comes, what they say will inform my choices and may, in fact, affect my life. So, you know, maybe I'm going to value that a little bit more highly.
It will be part of the dynamic, certainly, tonight, these guardrails that are in place because the microphones will not be turned on when the other person is speaking. It's an excellent point. All right, ahead, the path to the White House, how each campaign could get to the magic number of 270 electoral votes.
Continue to move until we get the total ban, the total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
Well, that was the fateful debate 75 days ago that changed the course of this presidential campaign. Since then, polling has shown a razor-tight race. For a closer look at the key battleground states and to show us potential paths to victory, our Elections and Surveys Executive Director, Anthony Salvanto, joins us. All right, Anthony, I love this part of the night when we learn all the different ways that each candidate could win.
Indeed. Good to talk to you, Nora. This is the fun part. I'm going to show you just how close this is and what it means. When we look at the fact that, remember, the presidential election is decided in the states, and we think it will come down to just 7 of those states. The closest ones, they're the battlegrounds. Now, across the Sun Belt, there are a few. We're going to see Nevada and Arizona, and then Georgia and North Carolina, all fast-growing, diverse states. And then in the upper Midwest, we've got Michigan, Wisconsin, and where the debate's being held in Pennsylvania. Now, you want to see just how tight these are? I'll show you some of our latest polls. In Pennsylvania, dead even. It's 50-50. And then in Michigan, it's a 1-point difference. That's within the margin of error. Similar story in Wisconsin. It's a 2-point difference. Again, in the margin of error. Those are examples of what we mean by razor tight. So how does this play out then on election night? Well, we're going to take a look at what we call the paths to victory for each of the candidates. So I'm going to bring up that map, and the states you're going to see in red, we think they're going to go Republican. The ones in blue, we think they're going to go Democratic. And those battleground states I talked about, those are in gray. So we can play a little hypothetical game here. Let's start with Pennsylvania. And let's say, okay, Democrats won it last time. Let's suppose Harris can hold it this time. I'm going to put that in her column right there and light it up in blue. Now, if that happens, and that's an if she were to then also hold the states that Biden held in the upper Midwest, I'm going to put Michigan in her column, and then I'm going to put Wisconsin in there, and that, all else equal, would get Harris to the 270 that she would need. Okay, there's another path for her, and that could be through those Sun Belt states. She could, if she flips North Carolina after the Democrats lost it last time, if she keeps Georgia in the Democratic column, which Joe Biden narrowly won, and then goes out west and holds on to Arizona and also holds on to Nevada, that also gets her over 275. Now, for Trump, and this shows you also just how pivotal Pennsylvania can be, here's a hypothetical for him. He wins Pennsylvania, let's suppose, like he did in 2016, and then he could hold North Carolina like he did last time, and if he were to flip Georgia back into his column, that gets Trump to 270. So those are just some of the scenarios that could play out, but the big story is, in a race this close, every vote, every state starts to matter, Nora.
Anthony Salvanto, thank you so much. And of course, those battleground states, those 7 states could not play a more important role. So let's turn now to Major Garrett. He's got to look at where the campaigns have focused their time. Hi there, Major.
Hi, Nora. Anthony loves maps and numbers. I love maps and numbers. This map, though, no numbers, only blobs. But I love blobs, okay, folks? I love the blobs, too. All right, very simply, travel during this 2024 campaign in blue, that's where the Democratic ticket has gone. Red, that's where the Republican has gone. The gray blob, I told you I love the blobs, both. Guess what, folks? All the blobs are in the battleground states. Hello, that's exactly right. Look at the blobbiest state of all. No disrespect, Pennsylvania. God love you, the Commonwealth. More blobs than anyone else. Republicans and Democrats are going to and have been descending on Pennsylvania. Same thing with Michigan, Wisconsin. Interestingly, North Carolina. Nora, 75 days ago after that first debate, the Trump campaign thought North Carolina was done and dusted, over. Not anymore. They're spending a lot of time there, and of course, Nevada and Arizona. These blobs are not just representative of the thing that candidates value most, their time and their rallies and their exposure. They're also indicative of campaign ad spending, digital and television and radio. They're also indicative of offices for the campaigns, volunteers, door knocking, all the fundamentals in campaigns. So wherever you see blobs, that's where the campaigns are most active. And a word of warning, if you're an undecided voter in any of these blob states, to use a football term, have your head on a swivel. You are likely to be tackled walking into the grocery store by one of these two campaigns.
It's an excellent point. And of those 7 battleground states, Trump only won North Carolina in the last election. So it's a competitive again this year, but leans Republican at this point, but
narrowly, very narrowly.
Very narrowly. Major Garrett, thank you so much. Let's turn to another big policy issue this election cycle, and that is reproductive rights. The issue of abortion kept Democrats competitive in the 2022 midterms, and it is helping boost Vice President Harris today. Take a look at this new CBS News poll. It finds Harris leads Trump by a wide margin among those in the battleground states of Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin who say abortion is a major factor in their vote. Those are the 3 states that you will hear us refer to as the blue wall that Democrats have to win in order to win the presidency. Margaret, what about this issue of reproductive rights and abortion rights that Kamala Harris is likely going to hammer Donald Trump on tonight?
She will, because even before she was the nominee, it was Vice President Harris's job to prosecute this part of the case. The abortion issue is something Joe Biden said he personally felt uncomfortable discussing. So she was the one on the college campuses out there talking and trying to rally support for people concerned about access to all sorts of reproductive health care. We know that in 9 to 10 states, depending how you calculate this, abortion initiatives will be on the ballot themselves. So that may lead to turnout. And that could actually help in states like Arizona and Nevada, where you will see it. There are places like New York where Democrats are talking about other initiatives also being related to abortion and hoping it boosts turnout. That's the cynical political take. She will make the argument that this is simply about freedom. I mean, even to her walk-on song, she is driving home that message that it is about choice rather than having to be about the procedure itself. So it's a case she can uniquely make, and she certainly says to Donald Trump, you put those justices on the court who struck down Roe versus Wade.
We talked about that message that we all watched during the Democratic National Convention, where you saw the Democratic Party try and embrace the ideals of freedom. Freedom to make your own reproductive choice. As the vice presidential candidate, Governor Walz says, mind your own damn business, as he says. It relates to a number of things for him on this particular case, talking about reproductive rights. How do you see that playing out, Nancy?
I think Harris is definitely going to bring it up tonight if the moderators don't. The Harris campaign assumes that there will be a question to Donald Trump about abortion. But regardless, she's going to bring it up because he's kind of been all over the map. He's been claiming lately that he isn't anti-abortion, and he has staked out a number of different policy positions on this issue. So she is going to want to set the record straight and make the case that she and she alone is the candidate for reproductive rights.
Well, what about that? Because certainly if we reach way back into Donald Trump's life, he donated to Planned Parenthood and other so-called pro-choice or pro-abortion rights groups. Then he moved forward and appointed 3 justices to the Supreme Court. He proudly says, I helped overturn Roe versus Wade. But now that this issue has become so dominant in so many states, we heard stunningly Donald Trump announce that he was going to have the government pay for IVF fertility treatment.
He's been fishtailing on this issue, and I think that's partially because he's been a little bit at sea since Harris became the nominee. And so this was one of his many different gambits to try to find a comfortable place in handling her candidacy. But I think the larger question, which will be so interesting, is on this question of freedom. Because if the campaign is about who's going to be thinking about me when they're in the Oval Office, well, the conversation here is for women, who's going to be thinking about me and my choices and autonomy over my own body. But Harris is making a larger claim, which is, I will be thinking about you when I'm in the Oval Office, and these kinds of decisions have to be made. And so if she can prosecute the case and make it more broad, it feeds into her larger, biggest, really campaign argument, which is, I'll be thinking about you, he'll be thinking of himself, and that will keep him from thinking about you, and things will happen which will not work for you.
But, you know, John, one of the things that on this issue is so tricky for Donald Trump is also what it does within the dynamics of the conservative movement. Mike Pence, his former vice president, came out against him and his candidacy specifically on the issue of abortion and saying he wasn't pro-life enough. That and fiscal conservatism, he said, were where he drew the line, not January 6th, which was an interesting position to stake out. But it underscores that there is a part of the conservative movement, particularly evangelical Christians, who aren't comfortable with the fishtailing you talked about, nor the fact that in the Republican National Committee agenda that was set this year, abortion was largely removed. There was, I think, one reference to it, Nora.
Yeah. The other issues we're going to talk about coming up, the economy, which has consistently shown the top issue, and immigration, where no doubt Trump is going to hammer Kamala Harris on that tonight. Up next, we'll also take you to a key county in the battleground state of Pennsylvania to find out what voters want to hear from these presidential candidates tonight. Welcome back to CBS News coverage of the presidential debate. Pennsylvania was the deciding state in the 2020 election. With its 20 electoral votes, the Keystone State formalized Joe Biden's victory over Donald Trump. And it is one of the 7 battleground states that CBS News is watching once again. Our congressional correspondent Nicole Killian is in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, a crucial suburban battleground, speaking with voters. Good evening, Nicole.
Hey, good evening to you, Nora. And Bucks County is considered one of those collar counties that surrounds Philadelphia, and it is a very pivotal county in the sense that it went for President Biden in 2020 and typically has gone for the Democrat in past presidential cycles. But this cycle, Republican registrations are up, and that is why this is a critical bellwether, depending on the voters who join us here tonight. And by a quick show of hands, I would like to know who supports former President Trump? And who supports Vice President Harris? And you did not raise your hand.
I did not, no.
You're undecided.
I'm still undecided.
Tell us why, and are you looking to this debate tonight to help make up your mind?
I definitely hope for this debate to actually help me choose tonight, because it's a lot of lack of trust on both sides, and I want to see what both sides still have to offer without having to lose too much at the same time. I don't necessarily like leaning one way or the other, so I want to see what they have to say, and that'll definitely lead my decision.
And for those of you who have decided, what do you want to see?
I want our jobs to remain in America, and I would like to see the border situation get under control.
And you're someone who supports former President Trump, so do you. What do you want to hear tonight?
I want to hear how President Trump will go after Kamala in terms of policy and not go after personal attacks. I want him to just focus solely on policy. And I want to make sure she, for Kamala Harris, if she wants to get any support from independent voters, she needs to make sure she knows she can be trusted without a teleprompter or notes or her vice president. So I'm looking forward to see what the debate shows us.
And for those of you who support Vice President Harris, tell me what you're looking for tonight.
Well, I want to hear Kamala Harris lay out any policies that people may still be questioning what her stand is. But mostly I want to see if it's possible to have a really good debate where people tell the truth both sides tell the truth and actually address the issues.
And you're a first-time voter, so what are you looking for?
I definitely agree. I want both of the candidates to debate in a respectful manner and really just debate their policies and not, like he said, personal attacks. And I just hope that it's a respectful debate that doesn't turn into, just interrupting and, just stuff that doesn't actually involve the debate,
Well, of course, Nora, we are going to be here all night watching this debate with our panel of voters. We'll be getting their reaction in real time and bring that to you later this evening.
Well, Nicole, thank you for bringing those group of voters together. Already we've heard some interesting things and can't wait to check in with you after the debate. All right, and joining us now are two of the best political reporters in Pennsylvania, John Delano, political editor at CBS Pittsburgh station, and Natasha Brown, our political anchor at our CBS Philadelphia station. Natasha, let's start with you. You just heard from some of the voters right there in Bucks County. Talk about how important these Philadelphia suburbs are.
Oh, they are extremely important, Nora. Good evening to you. And the city of Philadelphia certainly is extremely important as well. If you'll recall, back in 2020, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris won the city of Philadelphia with 81% of the vote over their competitor, Donald Trump, at the time. So this is an extremely important city. The suburbs are important as well. Democrats need to hold on to voter registrations, hold on to their support there in areas like Bucks County, which is about an hour and 15 minutes away from the city of Philadelphia. So every vote is going to matter in this case, and voter turnout is also going to be very important as well. In 2020, it was some of the highest voter turnout since 1984 in the city of Philadelphia. So Kamala Harris is going to need that kind of energy, that kind of support, that kind of voter turnout here in this area in this election.
Natasha, you've heard us talk about Pennsylvania as such a huge electoral prize, a must-win states for these candidates. What are the issues you hear are important?
I think it's the issues that are important to most Americans at this point. I mean, it's the economy, it's inflation, it's reproductive rights, it's crime in urban areas like the city of Philadelphia and some of the outlying areas. All of those are going to be issues that are on the ballot in this election. They will certainly come up in the debate tonight, and folks are going to be listening to see where these candidates stand on these issues. It's going to make all the difference, and in a race that is already turning out to be very, very close at this point, with only 56 days to go. Every vote counts. They need to be traversing this state from the southeastern part of the state here where we are in Philadelphia to central Pennsylvania, the Harrisburg area, and also the western part of the state, Pittsburgh area as well. So they're going to need all of these votes in all of these areas of the state of Pennsylvania to matter, and all of these voters to come out.
Natasha, thank you. John, how do you see things right now in the state of Pennsylvania?
What about Trump? Well, thank you, Nora. First of all, it's great to be with you and that awesome political team you have around you. There's no question that Pennsylvania is key, and Western Pennsylvania is going to play a very important role in all of this. It wasn't that many years ago when Western Pennsylvania, particularly the counties that surround Allegheny County, Greater Pittsburgh, voted Democratic for president. When Al Gore ran in 2000, 6 of the 10 counties out here voted Democratic. But in the recent elections, it's down to one county. One county, Allegheny, which is the Pittsburgh County, is the only county voting Democratic. So for Kamala Harris and for Donald Trump, the votes out here are absolutely essential. And winning those votes requires them to spend time here. We just saw that the vice president spent the weekend here in debate preparation. That made perfect sense because it connected her to this region. But she's going to have to come back and go to the outlying counties, not to the city. Hillary Clinton made that mistake in 2016. She only went to Pittsburgh, and she lost the state of Pennsylvania. 6 million votes cast, but she lost by 40,000 votes. That's all. She could have gotten those 40,000 votes had she campaigned in the outlying counties of Pennsylvania. And I will just add that I had a conversation with Mike Whatley, the chairman of the Republican National Party, yesterday, who said that when it comes to Pennsylvania, Donald Trump wins it or loses it right here in Western Pennsylvania. Nora?
It's an excellent point. And so, John, have you seen any signs that the Democratic campaign, whether it's Kamala Harris or her vice presidential nominee, are going to go to any of those counties that you talked about, those collar counties?
Well, yes, they've learned the lesson of Hillary Clinton, and they have been out here. The vice presidential candidate, Governor Walz, was down in Fayette County, once a Democratic stronghold, now votes Republican. He was also up in Erie as well. Kamala Harris was out here just before the convention with a little bus tour in which she went to Beaver County and really locating herself in areas that are traditionally Republican nowadays. But it's the margins. You got to win a few of those votes in order to win Pennsylvania. Philadelphia is important, but let's not forget this Midwestern part of Pennsylvania. Nora?
John Delano, thank you so much for your expert political advice and analysis. Thank you. Coming up, let's talk about the economy, how the candidates compare when it comes to your hard-earned money. One of the primary drivers on the minds of voters, the economy. In fact, a CBS News poll earlier this summer shows it's the #1 issue for voters between 18 and 29, as well as those 30 and older. Senior business and tech correspondent Jolene Kent joins us now with the breakdown of how these two tickets compare when it comes to the pocketbook issues. Jolene, so good to have you here. Let's first talk about grocery prices.
That's right, Nora. Recently, food costs at home have actually been growing more slowly. We like to see that. But the reason why many people continue to struggle with grocery carts is that over the past 4 years, grocery prices are up over 20%. You are paying a lot more today than you were 4 years ago. For example, on a $150 grocery bill in 2020, that same cart is now $182. That's $32 more at the checkout. And wages, of course, do outpace inflation. That's good news, but this reality is still so painful. Now, Vice President Harris has said she will pass the first ever federal ban on price gouging food that would bring new penalties for companies that exploit crises and break the rules, but there have been few details beyond how this would be implemented. Now, former President Trump has proposed 20% tariffs on imported goods, which would in all likelihood be passed on to consumers and increase the sticker price of those items. Economists are telling us they estimate tariff proposals would cost the typical middle-income household at least $1,700 more a year, Nora.
I know, and Kamala Harris uses an even bigger number than that. Surely she will bring that up tonight. Let's talk about tax policy. How do the two compare when it comes to cuts and increases?
Yeah, this, of course, will vary depending on your income level. So let's look at some example salaries here. A household earning $48,000 thereabouts a year. Under Trump, you'd get $870 more income on average come 2026. Under Harris, you would earn $2,260 more. Now, if your household earns $138,000, about that a year, under former President Trump, you would get $3,970 more income on average come 2026. Under Harris, you'd get about $2,800 more per year. Now, per our own Money Watch team, economists say that under Trump, everyone's going to get a tax cut, but the biggest winners are going to be the higher income earners. Now, under Vice President Harris, the biggest benefits go to the lower income earners, and she would increase taxes on the highest brackets, Nora.
All right, Jolene Kent, thank you so much. Want to bring back in our policy. And Ed O'Keefe, we have seen Vice President Kamala Harris begin to roll out some more policy proposals aimed at many of these voters she's trying to court.
Yeah, I mean, it was things like last week suggesting that she would try to modify tax breaks for new small businesses up to $50,000 from $5,000. All this requires Congress and requires a lot of conversation about taxes more broadly. There's the debate about whether you would tax tips or Social Security wages, that both of them have waded into. Harris says she's for ending taxes on tips so long as the sub-minimum wage is also brought up across the country, because in several states it's still at like 1990s levels. And so they understand in her campaign, at least, they've got to be talking about dollars and cents. It's those undecided voters, like the guy sitting there with Nicole Killian tonight, probably thinking about, you know, how much are groceries costing? How much could my new house cost? How much will the car payments be going forward? All of that on the minds of voters, and they understand. Look at our poll, look at everyone else's. He still has the advantage when it comes to who would better handle the economy.
Well, particularly with non-college educated white voters who are working class. And that's interesting because he has the advantage in our polling, the working class and the wealthy. Kamala Harris, the vice president, currently is pretty competitive when it comes to perceptions among the middle class that she would actually deliver for them. And it's interesting, there was a lot made just in the past week. I mentioned earlier the slightest of policy differences from Joe Biden. It was, you know, raising the corporate tax rate by slightly less and raising the capital gains tax by slightly less than a proposal by Joe Biden. It was seen as an outreach to the business community, to be perceived as less anti-business than he is.
And her top donors, for that matter.
And her top donors. Let's check in quickly with Robert Costa. He is there at the debate site. Good evening, Robert.
Good evening, Nora. We've heard a lot about Bucks County, Pennsylvania in our CBS report tonight. I'm fine with that. I grew up in Bucks County, but talking to both campaigns, it's not just about suburban Philadelphia. The target audience tonight, that labor family in the industrial Midwest, in the South as well, in places like Georgia. Who's going to speak to them on immigration, on the economy, and say that not only are they the candidate of change, but the candidate of the working person in this country? And Trump believes, I'm told behind the scenes, that he can be the anti-establishment candidate like he was in 2016. So look for some of that spirit tonight from him.
It's an excellent point, Robert Costa. Let's check in now with Weijia Jiang, who is also there, covers the Harris campaign. How does Harris make that case?
Well, Nora, she has been trying to make this case since she began her candidacy, and we'll have to see how she's able to distinguish herself. But we do know over the weekend, when she was asked the one thing she wants to get across during this debate, she said it's time to turn the page on divisiveness and chart a new path forward. Well, one thing we'll be watching, Nora, will these two nominees shake hands? That has not happened since debates in 2016. And so we'll see whether she'll be extending that hand first.
All right, Weijia Jiang, thank you so much. Up next, the debate begins. Vice President Harris and former President Trump take the stage. Our coverage will continue momentarily here on CBS and our streaming channel, CBS News 24/7.
Our campaign, this campaign, is a fight for the future.
And we will make America great again.
This is a CBS News special, America Decides, the presidential debate. Now reporting, Nora O'Donnell.
Good evening. We are just moments away from one of the most anticipated events of this presidential campaign. Tonight, Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump face off in their first and potentially only debate. Both will be looking to share their visions for the future of the country. Our CBS News team, the best political minds in the business, will be back after the debate for analysis and for fact-checking. Now, we head to Philadelphia for the presidential debate, which tonight will be hosted by ABC. Let's listen.